Greetings, I'm Dr. Rosalyn Beatty, and I am a part-time faculty member in the Clinical Mental Health Counseling Program at Union Institute and University. And one of the things of what we're going to discuss today are 5 tips for creating sustainable relationships with students in a virtual learning environment. One thing as faculty members who teach in a virtual learning world, we always want to know, how do I stay connected and involved with my students? Well, what I'm going to go over are 5 tips that you can use weekly to build sustainable relationships that create long-lasting relationships, which will in turn increase the interactions between you and your students and help supplement the information that is learned in your courses. Tip number 1 is become part of your learning management system. So what's your learning management system? When we think of a learning management system, that basically is the platform that we use to bring our information to our students. Here at Union, we have Campus Web. And the first tip for including yourself in the learning management system is creating a Meet the Instructor areas. Typically we include the information regarding our units, and we have listed our objectives, additional information that we want students to know. Well, why not include yourself in there for students to be able to get to know about you? And in my learning management system, I create a specific page that says Meet the Instructor. And on that page, you'll see 3 things. You'll see my biography, you'll see my teaching philosophy, and you'll also see a YouTube video introduction. And so with the biography, that's going to give students a little bit of background about myself, my learning and education objectives, and then also what type of experience I have in the real world. And so this gives students an opportunity to get to know a little bit about my background. When you think of a traditional learning environment, you have that first day where you typically give all this information about yourself. Well, in a virtual world, you have to find alternative ways to present this information. This step will build the relationship with your students. Also, I have information regarding my teaching philosophy. Now, when we think of teaching philosophy, a lot of time it goes back to when we were interviewing for positions, and we think that's the only time that we had to explain that information. Well, it's actually very helpful for students to understand what is our teaching philosophy, so then they can understand specifically why we teach the course the way that we do and why we present information the way that we do. For me specifically, I use Bloom's taxonomy, and having that information about Bloom's taxonomy helps students to be able to understand how I build upon assignments and specific steps to increase their ability to go through each step and level of learning. And lastly, there's the YouTube video introduction. This begins to create a face-to-face interaction where students can actually see me and get to hear my voice and establish that relationship with me. And so in those brief few steps, that creates tip number 1 of how you can begin to create a relationship with your students in a virtual learning world. Tip number 2 is to establish virtual office hours. There are several platforms that you can use that will help you establish learning hours for students to be able to get in contact with you. A few that I have used before in the past are Skype, GoToMeeting, and Adobe Connect. This allows students the opportunity to touch base with you and ask questions about assignments. A lot of time with students, they want to be able to have a moment where they can get immediate returns on their questions that they have about assignments. So why not establish virtual office hours during the times that you already have set aside for grading? This allows students to really be able to have a connection with their professor and allow them to get answers to the question. An additional perk of using virtual office hours are that it cuts down on the amount of emails that you receive. And so students have a designated time where they know they're able to get a quick answer to their questions and discuss any concerns that they may have. Tip number 3, Google me. Well, necessarily we don't want our students to Google us, but a great opportunity to create a sustainable relationship is to have them use a Google Voice phone number. And one of the amazing things about Google Voice is that you can download a nifty app on your Android or your iPhone where students are able to have a way to contact you directly via phone. With Google Voice, it will actually ring directly to your cell phone, and you have the ability to turn this feature on or off at any time. And so it can ring directly to your cell phone, or you can have it off where it goes directly to a special voicemail box. One of the other perks about using Google Voice is that it creates a separate phone number for you to have. With virtual learning, most of the time we work outside of our homes, and we don't necessarily have an office where we can go to where we have our own personal phone number where students can reach us. With Google Voice, this allows you to have your own office line directly to your cell phone. Another amazing perk of using Google Voice is that no minutes are used on your existing plan. And so it's basically having a free call where students can reach you on your phone to ask questions about assignments and questions about feedback that you've given. One of the biggest perks that I like about Google Voice is that it's free. And so you pay nothing for this, but you have an opportunity for students to be able to have greater access to you, where you can reach and you can have conference calls and follow up on information directly with your students, thus creating a better relationship between you and your learner. Tip number 4, send weekly emails. One nifty feature on our campus web learning management system is that we have an area for announcements. Well, one thing that I realized is that sometimes students may not necessarily check the announcements each week, but they check their emails each week. And so what I do is I create a weekly email that's posted in the announcement sessions, but I also send it out to students weekly. This gives a greater interaction with students to be able to hear directly from me. And this may address information such as what assignments are due this week, but also just tips and fun facts to keep them involved in the field, which for us is the counseling field, and to keep them involved in knowing about what's going on in the field. And this creates, and again, another pathway for establishing a relationship with students and getting to have that interactions beyond the information that's presenting on the campus web, to get to know you and be able to see you more within the course. Tip number 5. Tip number 5 is actually probably my favorite tip for creating sustainable relationship with students, and this is creating student self-care check-ins. And I think my professional identity as a counselor is going to come out a little bit in this tip, but I have noticed that it is the most effective tool that I have experienced that creates a sustainable relationship with students. And so with the self-care check-in, this is actually creating some point in your course, and it typically can be in the middle of the course or a little bit in the latter portion of the course, where you actually check in with students to see, how are you doing? We typically at Union work with older adult learners. And so with this being adult learners comes other responsibilities that they have with managing jobs, families, and other responsibilities that they have outside of the learning environment. With creating a self-care check-in, this gives students the opportunity to understand that as professors, we are concerned with the whole individual as a person, with not only making sure that they learn the material, but also making sure that they're taking self-care in learning the art of balancing to be able to be successful not only in our courses, but also in their field of choice. And so for our self-care check-in that I specifically do is that I create a discussion forum that makes them create an activity that they have to do that's going to do stress management and self-care. And I actually link it to literature for in the field, and for me, this is a counseling field. I find literature that has to do with self-care and reducing burnout and understanding why it's so important to implement this. Not only is this important to implement in their field of choice, but also as students, I want them to know the art of taking care of themselves so that they can survive and thrive in the programs here at Union. And so by creating this self-care check-in, it actually gives you the opportunity as the professor to create another established link with the student to say, hey, I don't only want to make sure that you do well on that test or do well on that paper, I want to make sure that you also do well within the course and within the program so that ultimately you do well within your chosen track and chosen field. And in closing, I want to thank you for taking the time to learn about 5 tips for creating sustainable relationships with students in a virtual learning environment. If you have any additional questions or concerns, feel free to email me at rosalind.brown-beatty@myunion.edu. This is a continuing process for me and for any professor that's teaching in the online learning environment. And so if you need support, have questions, or have anything that you want to get for additional feedback, feel free to email me and we can Skype, you can Google Voice me, and we can use all these tips that we just discussed about how to create a sustainable relationship with our students with also creating a sustainable relationship with each other as faculty members.